Okay, so keeping up with Google, right? It's like trying to, I don't know, predict the weather in a hurricane or
Yeah,
something.
the winds of change are blowing, that's for sure.
No kidding. Especially in SEO, where it feels like the only constant is change,
Absolutely.
which is exactly what we're diving into today. We've got this blogger, Chamnan on, and they went to 2 different Google search conferences in Bangkok,
Okay.
5 years apart, so we can really see how things have changed.
Yeah.
They were at the Google Webmaster conference in 2019.
Using these first-hand accounts is really interesting.
Right. Almost feels vintage now to think about it. You even got that, classic selfie with the name badge at the registration desk,
Ah, the good old days.
back when things seemed simpler, maybe?
Maybe simpler, yeah. I mean, keywords were king, backlinks were queen, all that good stuff. But don't get me wrong, a lot of those foundational SEO principles, they're still relevant.
Like you got to build the house before you start hanging the
Yeah.
fancy art on the walls, right?
100%. You got to have that solid website structure. You need your relevant keywords. But then fast forward to 2024, same city, totally different scene. Chamnan goes back to Bangkok, but this time it's Search Central Live.
Not the Webmaster conference.
Exactly. And AI is everywhere, right? Like, even the photo booth at the event had all these futuristic AI graphics. You can tell Google's trying to send a message.
Traded the blueprint for a spaceship, huh? So did all that SEO stuff we were just talking about, did it just become obsolete?
Not obsolete, but I think definitely redefined. See, before we had things like BERT and MU, search engines were basically just sophisticated matching systems. You type in best coffee shops, what happens? Google scans websites for those exact words.
And the more times your site had those words, boom, up you went in the rankings.
Spot on. Keyword density, that was the name of the game.
So how did AI change all that?
Well, with BERT and MU, Google's starting to understand language a lot more, like we do context, nuance, intent.
Okay, so let's break down intent for a second.
Yeah.
Because it sounds like AI is pushing us past just simple keywords. What's that actually look like in practice? Say someone's trying to rank their bakery's website.
Okay, so imagine someone searches for a cake recipe, right? 5 years ago, your website showing up depended on how many times cake recipe was plastered all over your page.
Makes sense.
But now, Google might be thinking, okay, are they looking for a simple recipe to try at home or a complex one from a professional baker? They might even be thinking about a video that someone just watched or an article they skimmed. Google's looking at the whole picture now.
So the why behind the search is just as important as the what. This is getting interesting. So how did all of this impact how Chamnan was actually doing SEO? What changed for them in those 5 years?
Well, one of the biggest things Chamnan mentioned was that just optimizing for long-tail keywords, it wasn't cutting it anymore.
Long-tail keywords being those longer, more specific phrases people search.
Right, exactly. They used to be like the gold mine for niche targeting. But now Google's AI, it's reading between the lines, So Google started favoring content that went deeper. It wasn't just about the keywords themselves, it was about the user's need, the question behind the question.
So it's not enough to just use the right words. You have to anticipate what the user actually wants, even if they don't type it out directly.
And that's where things get really interesting for anyone in the SEO world, because we're not just optimizing for search engines anymore, we're optimizing for
The human being on the other side of the screen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're optimizing for engagement, for user experience. We want to provide real value. And Chamnan actually talked about this. They had to totally rethink their content strategy after that 2024 conference.
See, that's what I find so fascinating. We can talk about these big shifts in how things work, but how do people actually adapt?
Yeah.
So what did Chamnan start doing differently?
So they went from just focusing on keyword optimization to really trying to understand their audience, right? Like instead of chasing after every single long tail keyword under the sun, they started focusing on creating in-depth content, really comprehensive stuff that answered a bunch of questions someone might have about a topic.
Less like a quick drive-by answer and more like, well, a deep dive.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. Think about it. If someone searches best chocolate chip cookie recipe, and they land on a page that not only has a recipe, but also has tips on choosing the right ingredients, maybe some variations they can try, how to troubleshoot common baking issues.
They're going to be way more likely to actually stick around on that page. They're going to read the content. Maybe they'll even click around and explore some other recipes. And Google's AI is going to pick up on that and be like, okay, this website's legit. Let's bump it up.
Exactly. And that's one of the biggest things Chamnan emphasized. quality over quantity. It's not about churning out a million mediocre blog posts anymore. It's about making a smaller number of really, really good pieces of content that people actually want to read.
So how do you actually do that? I mean, I get understanding your audience and all that, but how do you know what Google's AI is going to think is valuable?
$1 million question, right? And there's no easy answer. But here's the thing. AI is still learning, right? And how does it learn? By looking at what we engage with as humans.
So if we can figure out what our audience finds valuable and interesting and useful, AI will probably figure it out too.
Exactly. It's like we're working with AI instead of trying to outsmart it, which never really works in the long run.
Chamnan learned that the hard way, huh?
Ah.
Constantly chasing every algorithm update sounds exhausting.
Totally unsustainable. I think the big takeaway here is that AI is pushing us toward a more human-centric approach to SEO. Less about keyword stuffing and more about
Building those genuine connections with your audience.
yeah, spot on. Understanding what they need, what their pain points are, what they're interested in, and then you create content that really speaks to that.
So less about trying to game the system and more about becoming their go-to. Like if I have a question about this, this is where I go to get my answer.
Exactly. And listen, that takes time. It takes effort. But in the long run, it's a lot more rewarding than just chasing the algorithm.
Because once you build that trust, that loyalty, it's almost like it doesn't matter as much if Google changes things up, right?
Right. You've got something way more sustainable. You've got a community. You've got people who trust you, and they're going to keep coming back.
And that's not something an algorithm can fake, no matter how smart it gets.
Absolutely. It's that human element, the creativity, being able to relate to people, connecting on that deeper level. That's what makes content stand out.
So for everyone listening, trying to keep up with all this SEO stuff, what's the big takeaway? What should they be thinking about?
I'd say stay curious, stay adaptable, and never forget about the human on the other side of the screen.
Because at the end of the day, that's who we're all making this for, right?
100%. And as AI gets more and more advanced, the people who are going to thrive are the ones who get that, the ones who put the human experience first.
You know, it really makes me wonder what a Google search conference will even look like 5 years from now. Maybe it'll be less about keywords and more about connection. Instead of link building, it'll be all about community building.
I love that. Imagine an empathy expert giving the keynote speech.
Right.
Who knows, maybe 5 years from now, the line between SEO and just, connecting with people, it'll be more blurred than ever.
Now that's a future I'm on board with.
Right.
So next time you're stressing over your website analytics, remember that genuine connection you build with your audience, that's the metric that really matters.